Welcome to Lesson 4 of the Secret Tree of Alchemy lesson series. Today, I'm still going to be discussing Pisces High and the one tarot card that is assigned in that particular stack in the tarot card layout for the Secret Tree, the Aeon. Last time we got quite a bit into how what you might call the principles of the civilized world are introduced to the civilized world through various institutions, to include, as our last example, the judicial branches of the governments of the world. And this time we're going to be discussing something similar, but is based more on certain practices associated with the occult world. And before I get into that, what I'd like to do is discuss and summarize form, I guess you could say, the way in which principles relate to deeper, or what I would call essential forms of ideation or formations of ideation, in the sense of how ideas begin to constitute the human mind. Okay, and therefore they're important in constituting the explication of the reality that we all experience together, and that we as individuals experience when we look inward. So let's look at this word principle as it associates with ideation. This word I tend to categorize at Virgo level within the Secret Tree of Alchemy. And this has much to do with the pinnacle nature of clearly defined ideas associated with our social lives, our civilizations, our societies, our methodologies that are highly favored and therefore valued. By value, I mean it's more of a Cancer-oriented leaning ideation-wise, and favors more Leo leaning, as I'll explain at some point, hopefully, while I'm going through these stacks of cards. Okay, so when you're looking at something like astrology, and you take it all the way back through time to when it was first developed as something more consistently truthful than what it is today, because today it is a disinformation system, much as other cultic ideas and orientations are in our time. I can't think of a single religion that has escaped this development. And when you look at the symbolism associated with astrology, okay, you're looking at symbols that were chosen over a long period of time, of consistent study into the nature of reality explication and related field harmony. Okay, these symbols are designed to capture an essence of some kind that we would tend to categorize in accordance with what we encounter repeatedly in engaging in a kind of reflection into the reality that has explicated and manifests around us every day, changeable as it is. Evaluating the changeability of it as well as the consistencies of it, the way things change and the way they stay the same. Okay, these symbols capture an essence of some kind, and this essence becomes the basis for selecting analogies along similar lines that these symbols were chosen in astrology, and we're inclined to categorize various different ideas into these same groups. And we can do this to varying degrees of success. So we wind up with 13 clusters of ideation, okay, or chunks of ideation, if you want to use the modern psychological terminology for memory clustering as an analogy for how all this works. An example. that you could call exemplar enough to be a chief example. But so after long study, it becomes clear that there's like 13 very chief or important areas where these ideas tend to cluster. Maybe not perfectly, but that's okay. You don't have to be perfect. If you try to be too perfect, you wind up developing some kind of an enclosed system of belief rather than something that's more like a map. A map is infinitely more useful in life than a compulsory belief system, even if it's not militantly compulsory. Compulsory thinking tends to produce compulsion, which tends to produce a human character akin to compulsion that Wilhelm Reich called compulsive typology or character type. That's associated with neurosis that is very well and highly developed and ultimately very destructive to human nature. So, in my past videos, I tended to use this word essential quite a bit. And that's one reason why I'm coming back here to try and explain these ideas. There's essential and then there's principle. But principle tends to be very well defined in our culture. Not necessarily accurately or completely, but it is clearly defined and quote-unquote valued as a result of that. They are defined as being of value to us. They're defined as values to be upheld. And what exactly upheld means depends upon how you orient yourself to reality. If you are compulsive in life, you will tend to think that these values need to be upheld in a compulsive manner. By compulsory means, that might include militant means, because you are a believer. And belief is one of those ideas associated strongly with Capricorn in the Secret Tree of Alchemy, down there where the devil is the trump card assigned. War happens to be another analogy that's assigned down there, along with belief. And faith as an act is assigned over in Aquarius, which is right across the tree from Capricorn. But that's a whole other issue. Faith has a lot to do with understanding that you have a human nature and that that nature is supported into the metaphysics of whatever is out there that you would call higher being. And you can relax a little bit. You don't need to impose your faith on people. If you are, you're probably a believer of some kind. And compulsory belief tends to breed war. Believers go to war. In my book, I haven't seen any evidence to indicate anything else is happening with believers. So that's my explanation for principles. What principles are on an essential level. Essence. The definition I'm using for essential involves quite a bit. Essence. Harmonizing on an essential level, or a symbol capturing the essence of other ideas that are of like kind. This is why everything in the top part of the tree is so relative to everything else. And up there, things are not cut and dried in a black and white fashion, left or right or center. Okay? That's something that we encounter in our world, where we make choices that are best given the circumstances we face. That's another issue to get into that will be discussed when discussing the bottom part of the tree: Pisces, Aquarius, Capricorn, Sagittarius, Scorpio, Libra, and up into Virgo. And reaching up into automaticity, Virgo, Leo, Cancer, and then into what I call the intuitive level of Gemini and Taurus and Pisces high. So now that we got that out of the way, we can give some examples here. Like a shark, you could argue, a great white shark, can have faith in its nature in the sense that it is provided for by some higher being in the universes at, is much larger than our own nature, than a shark's nature, for example. Now, a shark does not know to have faith in anything. Faith is something that's very much associated with humans. We have a capacity for understanding reality on that level, and sharks do not. But you could argue that they could have faith if they were inclined to do so, because there is a spiritual nature, or you could call it nature, but it's more of a Zeitgeist that supports their nature as a shark. Now, a great white shark is a supremely aggressive species compared with humans. You could argue humans have their own aggressive tendencies, but they're so aggressive that the females can't survive mating with the males unless they're bigger than the males. All right? Because they're that aggressive. And there is a spiritual realm that supports that. Because in my studies, I've come to understand, to my own satisfaction at least, that what lives has soul, has spiritual Zeitgeist associated with its nature, its individual nature, its species nature, its living nature. Humans have souls that are human souls. We value ours in particular, so we don't think in terms of anything else having souls unless we bother to. And we are even taught not to think in terms of the animal world having souls. Not in the same sense that humans do. Because one of the reasons are we have the ability to act in faith. Now, this is part of our nature as human beings. And we can do this on a particularly volitional level, on a voluntary level, a consciously exerting level, which is an Aquarius idea. Okay, you are applying force of initiation at Aquarius level, where we are particularly vulnerable and weak, but we are also able to express novelty that other wills in our nature do not express. For example, Leo, in its automatic application of volition that we are not consciously aware of and is very strong, is not novel the way Aquarius is. It is what you might call old school. It is what you might call established. It's very serious about maintaining itself on that level as what it is. Same way, a lion is very serious about hunting and taking down the gazelle. Okay, when they come across them, or some water bison of some kind or another, buffalo, happen to come across at a water hole or whatever. They have their way of going about doing these things. It's old school. It's automatic. It starts happening right away. They're conscious of certain aspects of it, I'm sure, but they're not conscious to the same degree that humans can be conscious. We can act in faith in a manner that lions just do not, probably do not, as far as we can tell. At least it's not a linguistic thing, right? So then that's faith being accounted for on a summary level, an initial level, in discussing this tree and in discussing spirit, which is what we're trying to focus on here as much as possible. Spiritual Zeitgeist reflecting with reality Zeitgeist. Reality Zeitgeist is something we see around us all the time. It's part of our time of existence, our age of existence, our technological age or whatever, our linguistic age that we live in, where spiritual Zeitgeist supports that in ways that the secret tree of alchemy maps out as field harmony in analogy form, analogy categorization form. And we do the best we can with it. It's a map. And then when we don't need the map, we don't use the map. We experience life, we experience reality. And we don't take the map and bat somebody over the head with it and say, here, take this map. You are going to live by this, or else you will be killed or enslaved and or whatever. Things like that. We're not militant believers. I'm not, anyway, in discussing this tree. I've had to go through a phase, though, of relative paranoia over the issue of this tree because, I realized back in 1998 it was being used on an exclusive level to control people. And Kabbalah and other such things are only adjuncts of relatively benign influence. They're not that strong an influence on humanity, except maybe on a belief level, a surface level. Now that we've gotten that out of the way, we can get into discussing the next example I wanted to work with for Pisces High analogy, and as it's symbolized in the Aeon. The example I want to get into is called astral projection in the popular occult world, which is something I have yet to bother trying to practice. The meditations I've gotten into touch upon those kinds of meditations, but really aren't the same thing. I've been working with, influencing my dreams and my memories, kind of casually. And more recently, I've found the whole issue of astral projection to be interesting, but apparently not enough to where, I've dedicated my life to it enough. So I haven't really bothered to do these things. But I have become aware of it happening. It is something you can encounter certain signs of taking place if you happen to be, a target for it. So I first came across the whole idea of astral projection as in the Aeon, the card. It is symbolized by that ghostly looking hermaphroditic figure that is projected forward in the imagery of the card. It's clearly a projection. And it also happens to be what an astral projection looks like if it happens to be right in your face and you open your eyes and look at it. And if you could see it, you'll probably see something like that. They put something like that at the beginning of the movie called Eugenie, her journey, the story of her journey into perversion. And they put this phallic-looking, cloudy presence across the screen to indicate this is in your face, the movie that you're watching right now, the same way an astral projection is in your face. In other words, they're saying this movie is associated with vampirism, a vampirism that impacts every life on the planet, or anyone that would watch this movie. That image in the Aeon captures the idea of astral projection. In fact, all the imagery in the card does. The thing seated in the throne is projecting upon you on an astral level, to the point where they could astral project to your location where you were maybe sleeping, which is one of their favorite things to do. That's because you're out of the house on that same level. And that's like coming into somebody's house or breaking into somebody's house for some loot. And the other figure in the card, the canopy or hairline looking Lady Starlight, that assists the process somehow. It's a field harmonic process that's taking place, and it's associated with animal magnetism and meditation and hypnosis. These are all combined into one paradigm of occult practice, of cultic practice. Now, I first ran into this idea of astral projection back in the, right around 1990 time frame, somewhere around when I started reading various, different books. I started reading seriously around 1988, and I actually did read some books back then. And trying to get to the bottom of what's going on in the world, why people suffer so incredibly bad, just as simply suffering. And you're looking at psychology for answers, you're looking at the occult, popular occult genres of literature, you're kind of filtering through all that, looking around, collecting up books, thinking in terms of reading them at some point. And because you might be moving around, you might sell a bunch of these books off unread too. And one of the things I started running across was this whole idea of astral projection, which I found to be quite interesting. But I never did any serious attempts at it. Just like I never did any serious attempts at doing rituals and stuff that I was reading about. I have a tendency to plod around with my thinking and considering, which has been good for me in life, I now realize. And it's helped me to develop certain strategic inclinations in my life that tend to allow me to get to the bottom of things very efficiently, but with quite a bit of effort and suffering associated. So I was reading up into this whole issue for a decade and finding that, it's very frustrating to try and find out these technical details of what exactly is going on with this. It's like reading up on hypnosis where everybody just wants to talk about it, but the technical aspects of it are somehow out of reach unless you get the right book, which can happen, but you have to come across the right book because the right book isn't just advertised everywhere you look. You have to filter through a bunch of, mucky-muck level literature made, popular in its time, and then it fades out of existence, and then you come across it as like a backlog of literature avalanche that has taken place in the past, and you're filtering through all these books trying to get answers. And you can't seem to read enough of the darn things, but at the same time, many of the books you bought you didn't even read. And now you're moving again, you're selling off books. Around a decade later, in the late 90s, I'm in Denver, Colorado, shopping books again, and I come across a book on astral projection that looks promising initially. So I buy the thing. And this is where one of those weird incidents comes into play. I did something very similar to this when I got my first major astrology book, where the thing literally fell out of the shelf into my hands. But here I buy the book, and I decide I'm going to go down to the college campus because down on the 16th Street Mall at the Tattered Cover bookstore buying this book in the late 90s. And I decided to go over to the college campus. You go across a little highway type area and across a little track and field area and walk into their student union area, which has basically a food court area, and that's where I like to do a lot of my reading. That's one area. They had some excellent food courts on the mall back in the late 90s, like 2 of them on the mall, plus, the big bookstores on the mall. That's like 4 places you could sit and read, plus the college campus nearby. You can sit and read there too, and you get into the lifestyle of doing this day after day. Like you're in, Paris at the cafes reading or whatever have you. So I go down to the college campus, and they get a student union there, and it's actually quite a cool student union for such a small campus. The campus is, well appointed. It even has a Stars movie theater there, back when Stars was something a little bit different from what it is now, I guess. And you could even catch, Rocky Horror Picture Show events there every year. I caught one there one year to see what that was all about. And I decided, I'll just go into the bookstore and shop for another book. See what they got in there for books, since I'm shopping books today, right? So I go into the bookstore, and they got these wall lockers on the side there where you're expected to keep your bag, your school bag or whatever, while you're shopping the bookstore. And you could get a little key out of the wall locker and take it with you while you're shopping and leave your stuff in the wall locker. So all I had was this book, and wasn't even in a bag. And I take it over to the wall locker. I set her on the shelf inside the wall locker, and I close the wall locker and collect my key, and I go shopping for books. But lo and behold, when I get done and I come back to retrieve my book, I realize that somebody had dumped glue all over that particular wall locker. And the cover of the book literally had to be left behind, the front cover of the book. So this was not going to be a collector book. This was going to be either a read book or a throwaway book. So I decided it will be a read book. I'll just read it and then figure out what to do with it. So I read it, and it gave me certain technical details about astral projection that you just don't find in other books. And one of the technical details is, you get your typical explanation about when you astral project, your astral body exits your body, kind of like the way you see in vampire movies where Nosferatu comes out of the coffin, kind of leaning up out of the coffin to a standing position forward, like in the 1992 version of Bram Stoker's Dracula or whatever. And then you float off and dream your dream or go to wherever it is you go. And then it gives you technical details to the effect of, and this is important, your astral body collects energies wherever it goes. Okay, when your astral body leaves your body, it takes with it toxic energies or waste energies. and leaves those energies wherever you go, and then picks up fresh energies. And those fresh energies are sent back to your sleeping body through the, I guess you call it an astral cord or a silver cord that attaches your astral body to your physical body the whole time you're astral projecting. And then your astral body will leave waste energies out there somewhere and collect fresh energies before coming back to your physical body for you to wake up in the morning and then go off and experience your day well rested and feeling fresh for whatever reason. Hopefully you feel fresh. Because if not, maybe you're being visited upon by astral bodies, which we're going to get into here in relation to the practice of vampirism, out-of-body vampirism, which is something I've been talking about quite a bit, but not filling in too much in the way of technical details as to how and why these things happen. Okay, these people that practice out-of-body vampires know these technical details I just explained, and they make active use of it, and on a networking level, in producing hierarchy associated with the civilized world. This is compulsory hierarchy. Okay, these people do not like the middle class, because the middle class, if it is large, is something that is associated with free human society. People tend to gravitate towards some manner of middle class. And the middle class naturally is something that an upper class does not like very much, because it's the thing they tend to gravitate back towards in life themselves. So they're constantly trying to figure out how to get control over the middle class and cull it and effectively enslave it, making it a poor class. Of course, they developed communism for this purpose. Okay, communism has never been a means of equal rights development at all throughout its entire history, regardless of the ideation associated with, propagating communism as, via propaganda. Communism has been a means of simply culling and reducing the middle class down to poor class status. That means getting rid of carbon, quote unquote. If you think of carbon as a Virgo idea, number 6 there in the secret tree of alchemy, that's carbon, right? So you're going to be reduced and culled. And that's what communism has been actively practicing. They show up and they kill people. If you're a school teacher, they'll kill you even if you're not getting, shall we say, uppity in people's faces. Quit interfering with my freedom or whatever. Okay, communists kill. They rape and they kill. That's what they're reconditioned into from out of the Christian world. Communists are former Christians. Many of them become Christians again later in life. But they're conditioned out of the masochistic Christian paradigm into more of a sadistic orientation, both males and females. And they kill and rape in conjunction with everything that they're doing to impose tyranny on people. Basically, they are culling and killing, and that's about all. You can talk equality all you want. Okay, the only equality there really is in the world in a free society is the middle class itself. And that isn't pure equality. It's a centrist inclination of people who live in a free society. Poor people gravitate towards it. Rich people gravitate towards it. It's what you would call the social mean that tends to exist in a free society. Mean, median, mode, whatever. This is important for the aeon, this consideration of astral projection, in the sense that your loves in life are absorbed out of you, and the hatreds of life, or the sin, quote unquote, are dumped upon you and culling you, and maybe killing you, but certainly enslaving you if you manage to survive. If you're not of the upper class, you're going to be of a slave class or a police class, which is the middle class of the future. Presently, the people that run the banks, the elites, many of them are going to become middle class. The ones that, were involved in top-down infiltration actions. They're not going to be allowed to keep their status, or at least most of them are not. They're going to become middle class, and they're going to become deadly serious about policing to keep that middle class status. Because if you're not middle class or above, you're a slave. Okay, you're outside the green zone, outside the wall, and the police are on the wall, and that's what you see. And that's about all you see. You might not even be allowed in the green zones of the world, the moneyed zones, the green and white flag zones. Now, this is where we get back into how ideation is introduced into society. On the one hand, we talked about the example of the courts, the royal courts and the legal courts. They have their way of imposing new principles. These are the principles you will now live by, and here are the definitions of them in the documents that we issue into your life from out of these proceedings. Now, with astral projection, that's an analogy of that court system. Okay? They project into your life, and they, as an astral body full of toxicity, are in your face while you sleep, staring right into your eyes, staring right up your right nostril even to drill a hole in your head and drain out whatever ether manages to flow out that way, I guess, into their own astral bodies, while they basically dump energies into you, because waste energies tend to gravitate down in accordance with orgone biophysics principles, namely those of deadly orgone, or door, as it's called, as Wilhelm Reich coined the term. They could be sitting on your chest like a little demon or something, dropping toxic energies into your body while your healthier energies exit your body and are drawn into the astral body and are sent back through the astral cord, the silver cord, or whatever, back to a sleeping body somewhere on this earth. They might be all the way out in Southern California doing this to you because you were foolish enough to tune into their YouTube video. And they picked up your signal. That means you got strong energies. You're spirited. And now they're coming after you. This syncs that I'm watching indicate that this happened to Lynette Fromm, who decided rather than becoming, the academic that she might have become, being as spirited as she was as a young adolescent girl, she got into watching television big time. In fact, syncs of movies like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood indicate clearly that the Manson family was comprised largely of TV generational people of this general ilk, as, symbolized by them all watching television inside the old man's house up there at Spahn Ranch. And TV generational people are in the process of being culled down into slavery. Okay, those are all slaves in there watching those TVs. They are under control. They are dependent upon cultic existence, compulsory cultic existence, destructive cultic existence. They are part of that whole paradigm. It is still Abrahamic paradigm. It's what you would call designated destructive cults like Scientology, Church of Satan, Temple of Set, Process Church, Manson family, People's Temple. It's all part of that paradigm developed in modern times that we call destructive cultism. And there's definitional terms associated with that, with words like love bombing and methodologies that involve getting people exhausted enough to sign over their lives to a cult, etc., etc. Keeping people busy. Then you got to reward them with, what amounts to cultic candy, trance states involved with sexual activities, drug activities, intertwined with periods of group punishment, all designed to keep you from thinking clearly, all designed to muddy the waters of your being, the same way astral projection does. This astral body presence in your bedroom while you're asleep is the same basic idea as a decree issued from out of a court, or precedence, I should say. Precedence, as generated by court proceedings, is essentially civic principle. And the definitions are clear, but there's a window of opportunity for you to interpret the meaning of these definitions before these principles from out of proceedings become law, maybe through some other mechanism of government. Could be executive branch, could be oligarchy, could be some democratic process, or quote-unquote democratic. And once that happens, it becomes very difficult to eradicate these quote-unquote principles, because very often they're not genuine principles. You're being browbeaten down to subjected status. So essentially what's going on with the introduction of tyranny into government, what was designed to be, the government of a free people, and becoming transformed into a government of tyranny. All these processes are akin to processes associated with out-of-body vampirism. Okay, it's an analogy-based comparison taking place here. It's similar to what goes on in the tree. In mass media terms, it could be called what I've come to call syncing, where movies sync with other movies. And symbols are synced with other symbols, so you could compare the two symbols and come to a deeper understanding meaning-wise as to what those symbols actually represent or consistently represent relative to human consciousness and the human unconscious mind. Now, getting back into the card, the Aeon and Pisces High, as I've stated before, this represents reality in solute form, as it can affect reality that we experience in realistic terms. And we can reflect upon both of these things. But the thing that is in our face is more of a Sagittarius reality. An analogy that I've kind of mentioned in the past, that of volcanism, volcanoes, whereas the moon in the Thoth Tarot symbolizes Pompeii suffering pyroclastic flows from out of Vesuvius nearby. The town, the once living town of Pompeii, was then inundated and buried in volcanic ash and pumice. Very hot. And this was used in that particular card to symbolize, Pompeii becoming very much precipitate or solidified as we have uncovered it in our more recent times. Pisces low is precipitate. And in living terms, biological. But in dead terms, skeletal. In some fashion or another, that is telling. So there's, when you look at these tarot cards, you're looking at expressions of living reality and dead reality and precipitate, precipitant, catalytic, solvent, and solute conditions, okay, that are alchemical in nature. That's the alchemical touchstone that is used in these cards that I've, studied so far. Pisces High, the Aeon, symbolizes volcanism as a natural process that is occurring just prior to eruption. Okay. That would be, analogous to a court proceeding taking place behind closed doors, quiet in the hall, all that. And certain aspects of those court proceedings can be designated as secret, to be kept secret until some specific time when a judge in that court or judges decide that it is appropriate to release materials. Okay, this is where Pisces low symbolism in the form of the moon comes into play. You get pyroclastic flow in your face. And it just might kill you if you're not smart enough to survive the situation. You should have been able to understand the implications of secrecy, for example, and the rumblings associated with, secret proceedings taking place. And then you should have been able to put yourself in a better situation to handle that appropriately and live through the experience of what's going to become a volcanic eruption. And you can then bear witness to it and chronicle what you experience later. That's if you survive. In chronicling your experiencing, you are remaining carbon. Okay, you're still at least middle class on some level. You're with the people on that level, communicating with the people, and usefully so. This entire tree then, the field harmony associated with this tree, is being made likened to volcanic activity. on a scientific level, because these cards are supposed to be scientifically informed. So geology comes to play here in this respect. Astral projection then becomes analogous to this pyroclastic flow. It could be lava, it could be pumice accumulating from out of the sky, rolling down the side of a volcanic eruption, taking place down the hillside at high speeds, tremendous heat and gases and all that, just superheated gases that are going to just destroy the flesh on your bones or bury you before that can take place. And this can be likened to the process of being enslaved or killed. When you are a slave, there's nothing you can do, no place to go, except where you're told. You're told what to do every day. You're dependent upon your slave master for food and shelter and clothing. And they decide how these things are going to be provided for you. You really have little say in the process at best. And this is where we get into therapeutic measures that might be taken that relate to Pisces High and the Aeon. I've had the opportunity recently to attend a series of classes for an entire semester in college that were for practicing, exercises of, that condition you into becoming a bit more empathetic and compassionate. I believe they were referred to as compassion training courses that promise not only to teach about the whole issue of compassion, empathy, and what have you, the psychology of it, but also practicing the exercises associated with this. And to do this kind of work involved certain meditations that were done for class and also for homework that involved imaginal exercises. This is where you're envisioning things and you're holding ideas in your mind for a period of time. It's not a really extended period of time. These are small meditations typical of people trying to live, lives that, meditations are designed to be useful on that level and not cause you to trance out while you're trying to drive your car. All right. So they're not that extensive as meditations go. And when taking this class, it kind of struck me at first when I walked into the class as being rather religious. I guess the individual teaching the class was into Buddhism to a degree, but also the psychology associated with what she was studying. And, you have a tendency to be a little bit of a snot over the issue because religion is automatically something I keep at arm's length. But usually it's imposed. And I have a tendency to kind of knee-jerk along the lines, that even religions that I'm thoroughly unfamiliar with equate to imposition on an ideational level or otherwise, and are, compulsions, you might say. But as is usual with college courses, these classes turned out to be valuable, just like every other college course. Colleges are not as bad off as the right wing would have you believe. Sure, there's a lot of weird politics taking place on college campuses, some militant muscle flexing going on here and there, but college is still college, and it's been made excessively expensive. That's the major threat to collegiate life as it would be available to the middle classes. Okay, if you can't afford, then you can't go, right? And so college is becoming expensive. That's the major thing that's threatening people, in my view, about college. But going to courses, even the Marxist courses, aren't so threatening because really all it is philosophical orientation. If you're a responsible, free human being, you're not going to run off and try to murder or rape anybody because you attended a course at college. Okay, unless it's your job as a CIA operative or whatever on an asset level because you've been entrapped somehow and blackmailed. That's a whole other issue. So what you're essentially doing in practicing these disciplines, and these are disciplines that are influenced by Buddhism to a degree, as practiced since ancient times out of the Far East, China, through India, etc. And they're combined with, modern psychology, positive psychology, humanistic psychology. So back again here. What we're doing is, with these ideational exercises, imaginal exercises, we're holding ideas in mind for a period of time using the imagination. And what you do is you imagine yourself, and we get into this systematically, starting with really simple imaginings, some of it's linguistic, running ideas through our minds related to, learning to relax the body, for one thing, because every time you get into a meditational type exercise, that's one of the primary things you're doing, right? Even my meditations that I like to practice, these meditations are always practiced in conjunction with relaxing your body, in a toned fashion associated with being, generally awake and alert. But typically involves closing your eyes and imagining at the same time what, it's a guided meditation is what it is. So we do these several times during class, every time we take a class. And one of the chief things you're doing is you're learning to actively use your imagination. And while you're doing this, you're developing an experience for yourself. You're having an experience. It's a programming experience, you might say, a learning experience. So you get into it step-by-step, learning how to imagine a safe place, for example, you can always go to do imaginal type stuff. And you get further along into it, and you're imagining yourself, for example. What I like to do, if I ever do this, is imagine myself caring for another being of some kind or another. It could be child, infant, pug, like a dog or a cat, and practicing caring. And in conjunction with this caring, these imaginings that you're doing for yourself, you're also practicing empathy. So you're, seeing how this individual that you care for feels, you're experiencing even how they feel. This is empathy. And if they're experiencing pain of some kind, which I have a tendency not to try to get too far into imagining any other being experiencing pain, but I'm inclined to avoid doing that. But if for some reason there's anything wrong, you respond in like kind in experiencing what they're feeling. It might be an emotional thing. Maybe they just want attention. Maybe they just want to spend time with you. But if they're experiencing anything negative on an emotional level or a pain, that's where compassion comes in. And you're practicing the art of compassion in experiencing the same kind of pain. Okay? And then the other side of the equation for compassion is the problem solution, which should also come to mind. What can I do to alleviate this pain? And then so, alleviating the pain of another, you alleviate the pain of yourself. And the reason these imaginal exercises have value is because very often in this world, people are systematically isolated. They find themselves alone quite a bit, and they're looking for ways out of that. So these imaginal exercises are not designed to be escapes, the way many exercises of meditation have become. For example, watching television as an escape. It's been positively lethal to humanity, and not a very good programming source either, except maybe on the most shallow of levels, from your sitcom or whatever. And developing, sitcom personality as part of your experiential repertoire. So what you're trying to do is start to initiate a process of, maintaining or developing empathetic traits of personality, of orientation, of acquisition, and somehow the field harmony of your life, bringing you into contact with like-minded people of empathy, people of compassion, and becoming a part of that, whole scene. And that becoming a means of social interaction, or initial social interaction, maybe. I don't know how these things work out exactly. It's a mystery to a degree, right? How people get together and become acquaintances, friends, lovers. It's just a progressive thing that happens naturally. There seems to be a field harmony that provides these opportunities, bringing people together. It's part of what the secret tree of alchemy is all about. And you're basically holding ideation in mind. And while you're holding it in mind, it is an experience. And then when you stop the meditation and get on with your life otherwise, this experience doesn't just disappear. It becomes a part of you over the next, say, 6 hours as you encode the experience into long-term memory. And this is a process that involves, neurochemical cascading of neurochemicals through your brain for like the next 6 hours, and communications between your limbic system, which might be emotionally enhanced in nature, which makes the imprinting or the encoding that much more efficient. And your thalamus and your cerebral cortex all communicating back and forth for like the next 6 hours as you encode this experience. It becomes part of your long-term memory. And once that happens, it becomes part of your solute memory matrix as part of your own personal zeitgeist, a spiritual reality that can reflect back upon you in your living reality. The way spirit becomes a part of you, your experience becomes a part of spirituality, reflecting back and forth, kind of like a feedback loop. So every time you think in terms of being empathetic and compassionate, you're starting to develop what I call closure, in the sense that a clustering of experiences and memories and ideas will tend to collect up around central experiences in your life of importance that are, they were encoded with a particular amount of emotion, for example. This is where the limbic system becomes so important in the process of encoding memory, right? And they cluster up together in your own spirit, your spiritual zeitgeist, and become part of your spiritual, or shall we say, living paradigm of manifest zeitgeist. Okay, you are of human compassion. You are of human empathy in your life, increasingly all the time. And I think even a psychopath can benefit from these kinds of practices, because they've done brain scans on Buddhist practitioners of these meditation disciplines. And the brain scans show certain parts of the brain lighting up very consistently and very strongly. These parts of your brain are associated with having learned compassion and empathy. Okay, in modern psychological terms, in cognitive psychology, for example, these areas of the brain are associated with empathy and compassion. And some psychopaths are born with a lack of ability to tune in on this level of empathy and compassion. They're considered to be calloused on that level. And as soon as you're callousing on that level, you're already compromising your intelligence, and you're developing what you might call mechanistic ways of compensating for that loss, it results in a kind of intelligence, but not necessarily for everybody that becomes psychopathic. This kind of intelligence that you develop can also become highly Machiavellian in nature, to the point where you're essentially practicing politics and war all the time with people. And you're just not tuning into other people on an empathetic level, how they really feel about you. And much of what, is available on YouTube these days about psychopathy just being everywhere all the time, some of it strikes me as just a new media genre along the lines of Hannibal Lecter genre media that people like to consume as entertainment because, The Silence of the Lambs was so popular in its day because of Hannibal Lecter and what have you. But psychopathy tends to put people in jail because people aren't that genius, all right? And these people tend not to wind up in the clinic unless they've already been to jail. They're not necessarily suicidal like borderline personality disorder people are, so they tend to be very bad off in life unless they're rich or at least middle class and somehow making it in life and not getting caught up with, law enforcement or whatever. Now, once you've been practicing various life disciplines, for example, the ones I just described is just one example, all right? These kinds of life disciplines that I generalize as what you would call caring disciplines, and care is another one of those words. It's got quite a definitional range to it. Okay, there are very many ways to practice caring in your life. I consider it to be particularly important, and I associate it with cancer in the Secret Tree of Alchemy quite a bit. Caring, trust, home, emotional stability achieved, preparations achieved, collectivity maintained. And that reaches beyond merely just keeping yourself together with, integritous intent, but and enjoying the benefits of the providence's contribution to integrity in life. Once you've practiced these disciplines, you could envision them sort of becoming a part of your own aeon, as it were, trump card in your mind. You could take this trump card and completely redo the imagery of it to suit it to become suitable as a symbolic representation of your spiritual zeitgeist. That's your personal spiritual zeitgeist, and maybe also the spiritual zeitgeist of what you perceive to be your people in the world. And then you can take it to a level of people in general in the world, and then you can take it to a level of the world, the spiritual zeitgeist of the world itself, and beyond into the solar system, the universe. The universe is one of those words that's assigned to Cancer, in my view. Strongly centered there, even though in the Secret Tree of Alchemy, as laid out with the tarot cards, it's become a Leo thing, which is more what you would call exploratory in nature. And just one more idea to bring across relating to this subject of closure. What closure essentially is a form of caring that is practiced on a very fundamental level, even by young children and even infants. Is called, well, we think in terms of social inclusion as a means of fundamental care. Okay, that with which we care for, we include with us on a collectivity level, you might say. So, say 4-year-old is out playing, another 4-year-old comes along. The 4-year-old that is playing will socially include the other 4-year-old in play. Maybe a little bit reservedly, or even grudgingly, but they'll include the other in play. Okay, maybe very enthusiastically, as somebody who is like me level. And on a Secret Tree of Alchemy level, you could call this relational inclusion, which is something that field harmony supports on a provisional level, on a providing level, as fundamental integrity, the integrity that holds the entire universe together, allows you to care, and in caring, you begin to channel love, illumination, emotion, friendship emotion, for example. The emotions associated with empathy and compassion. Okay. And this develops what I call closure, because this collectivity inclination of, integritous nature, and you could even argue supernature or metaphysical kind of integrity, it brings together those that are like each other. So if you keep your mind tuned to the idea of humanity all together, for example, you will tend to become more inclusive on that level, and even at risk, you will socially include. So the mind works in a very similar fashion in organizing ideas. Like ideas include each other in relations, and they cluster up together. And you would call this an even more essential or fundamental level of caring taking place on an beyond universal level to a universal level to a macro level that we experience as reality. Okay. Where we socially include others with ourselves and care for each other. Okay, as you do this kind of thing, and even just from physical proximity with others, others that we're literally physically close to every day. Like if you happen to spend time, or two families spend time together in the same house, a girl in one family and a boy in the other family might fall in love with each other. Okay, because they are included together on a social level. Even just from proximity and from playing together or talking together or just being together, they come to love each other. So care is something that channels on a very fundamental or baseline level. Okay, it channels love into the world. Emotion appropriate to the situation into the world. And this collectivity of coming together in integrity and love as a result of, this inclusiveness, that builds what I call closure. Because, for example, a trauma that you suffered becomes a central idea, because usually traumas are associated with a lot of emotion, and they imprint very strongly in the mind as long-term memory. And part of the learning process, ultimately, that in time builds closure simply from you accepting the fact that you've been traumatized and accepting all the emotions you experience as a result, being accepting of it rather than denying it and repressing it, okay? You will tend to go on a learning journey. You call it a mystical journey if you want to, of, learning everything there is to know about that kind of trauma. And all these ideas, this learning is very important for you developing closure relative to that trauma. All these ideas are going to cluster together inclusively. All the positive learning experiences you have in life related to that trauma will in time bring closure, and together these memories, these experiences of learning will become golden. This is where you get the golden coloration associated with top honors in colleges and academic level. It has to do with, what learning brings to humanity on a closure level. And good, healthy closure tends to breed a kind of inclusiveness that is willing to exercise itself regardless of risk involved. And that is an important part of the overall solutions to all these world problems associated with racism. You don't need racism to counter racism. You need to exemplify not being racist, which can be very hard for people that are, especially people that are truthfully oriented to reality and they realize they're under racial attack. How do you find your way towards this kind of closure for real, not fake, not in denial, not to the point where you're going to become enslaved yourself? You need to learn to risk not trying to enslave other people, even though you know that's what they want to do to you. And you know this because of what's happening around you. How do you cut your way into surviving through that and then thriving in genuine closure with other people? Because I try to keep myself focused on a humanity level as much as possible. Minimize, for example, my racial identifications to what I consider to be a sensible degree, a reasonable degree. The point where I'm not intruding my race into other people's lives and, pushing racism on people or pushing race as a hyped up issue onto people. And with that, I feel like I've covered this presentation completely enough. I'm hoping I didn't miss anything and then have to make a whole other presentation on this particular card. I think I've covered this card extensively enough for, detailed study, and I'm convinced it's all value information. So for the next lesson, I'm definitely thinking in terms of getting into that Aries stack of cards. And thank you for listening.